You are joining me now for Erikson's third stage of development. In the third stage of development, around 3 to 6 years old, and these are kind of approximate, remember, they're kind of fluid ages, but these are just kind of general stages of psychosocial, relational, emotional, psychological development, and it's all driven by social and relational needs. That in this stage, for a kid from 3 to 6, we see a few little changes going on for them. They're taking that independence from the previous stage and they're moving it to a new level. We actually call this initiative versus guilt. The stage is called initiative versus guilt. They take that independence to a new level of doing some things and choosing some things to work on, even apart from mom and dad. And so one of the biggest one of those is school, right? They start to do school on their own and play with their peers and things like that. And they very quickly get an idea of where they fall within school. They have some different maybe things that happen for them. Maybe the teacher comes in and she shows them the color red, and all the rest of the kids in the class say, "Oh, that's red," and maybe your kid doesn't know what color that is. And then the teacher comes in and everybody says, "Oh, I can count to 100," and your kid can't even count to 10. Well, then your kid begins to feel a little bit guilty that they can't do things on their own. I mean, they pop the lid off the glue stick and they start self-medicating and huffing right there in the class. Their substance abuse problem starts real early because they feel a little guilty. There must be something wrong with them that they can't figure out what these colors are and these numbers are. So initiative is them being successful, being away from you. I remember going into my daughter's pre-K class, even when she was like 4, and the teacher approached me and said, "Mr. Archer, do you notice something different about you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And she says, "You're the tallest person in this classroom." And I thought to myself, well, I'm only 5'10" or so. That shouldn't be the tallest person in the class. And I looked around, and sure enough, I was the tallest person in the classroom. And I realized I was the only parent still in the classroom. I was the only one still walking my daughter in and helping her hang her backpack up and make her lunch choice. And the teacher said, "She can do that on her own, just watch." And she asked my daughter to do that. And my daughter, Avon, went over and began to hang up her backpack, and she made her lunch choice. And I got a little tear in my eye like, oh, she doesn't need me anymore. Well, that's initiative. She's able to do some of that on her own. And kids are supposed to take that initiative. That's one reason you want them prepared for school, whether that's preparing them at home or making sure they're prepared by going to a preschool. Kindergarten's a lot different than it used to be. I remember in the little rural area where I grew up, when I was growing up and hit kindergarten in the early 80s, man, it was just about civilizing you and getting you ready for first grade. It was basically, hey, let's make sure you don't eat anything off the floor, and let's make sure you're wearing pants every day. And if you could do that, score, you get to go to first grade. And now they're looking for a lot more. Your child should be able to hold a pen or a pencil and write and not necessarily write, but be able to color and hold that pencil and do some things and recognize their name. And so you want to work with them a little bit now, right? You want them to have that initiative and not feel guilty that they can't do things on their own. Now, the other thing that we kind of want to think about a little bit is the social relationship of opposite sex parents. So, for instance, a little boy, you can call him mama's boy right now. I remember I would ask my son, who are you going to marry? And when he was 3 to 6, he would say, "Mama." He just got these stars in his eyes. My daughters, they would both come through the house. I'd be watching the Dallas Cowboys, and they would come through and they would park themselves right in front of me, right between me and the television as I'm watching the Dallas Cowboys. And they would start to twirl around. And I remember my daughter would wear this pink princess paraphernalia. I mean, she is pink princess from top to bottom. She'd come in clippity-clop in these little pink plastic princess shoes. And why in the world did she choose to spin right there in front of the Dallas Cowboys? I mean, there are many safe places in my home to spin and twirl. Well, that's because I was there, right? She wanted my attention. She wanted me to stop and say, "Oh, be still my heart. A real life princess has come into my house. Oh, you are so beautiful. Would you wait here for a minute while I go get my daughter? She would love to meet a real live princess." And then I'd get up right in her face and I would say, "Oh, you are my daughter." She wanted me to be gushy sweet like that. Now, here's what's really happening. She is taking some butcher paper and putting it up on her mind's wall, okay? And it's kind of in her unconscious, all right? It's not something she's aware of, but she's got this big piece of paper up in her mind's wall, and she's taking out some psychological scissors. and she looks at daddy and she makes some cuts on this pattern. She watches the way that daddy talks to mama, and she makes some cuts on that pattern. She watches the way that daddy relates to her, and she makes some more cuts to her pattern. And then she keeps that pattern in her unconscious. And when puberty hits, what's she looking for? Well, according to a lot of people that really study this theory, they believe that she's using that pattern of what she saw in daddy from 3 to 6 for what she's going to look for in a long-term mate, and guys that she's interested in from puberty on. And so that pattern's pretty important, right? Now, if daddy is a good father, that's a really, really precious story, right? Now, if daddy is a scoundrel, or if daddy is abusive, maybe she watches the daddy abuse mom, then doesn't that have a very different feel to that story, right? She, instead of cutting a pattern of a gentle father, she's cutting out a fist. And now she doesn't make a list, I want him to hit me when I get into a relationship. She doesn't make a list like that. I don't want him to give me bruises. I want him to call me bad words. That's just what she kind of gravitates toward. Again, it's her unconscious that pushes her there. Now, some people watch this video, I'm sure, and say to themselves, well, that's crazy. I watched my mom go through that, or my grandmother. I went through that as a little girl. I'm not going to go through that in a long-term relationship. Here's what you've done. You've moved that insight up to your conscious awareness, okay? And in your conscious mind, you now have a checklist and you're looking for those things. And if he talks to you abrasively, you're like, I'm not going to put myself in that relationship like I did, I saw my dad have with my mom. Again, you've made a difference because you've moved it from the unconscious to the conscious mind. For somebody that never really made that checklist or had that awareness, they would just kind of be drawn toward that type of person. Now, that's all a lot of conjecture, right? There is a little bit of research out there, though, that seems to support that. One is a study that basically says that a young lady's relationship with her father might actually have something to do with when she'll start her period, her first menstrual cycle. The idea that if she has a strong relationship with dad, she might actually start her menstrual cycle, have a later period. Now, why in the world would that be? Why would it be that if she has a poor relationship with dad or an absentee father, that she actually starts her puberty earlier? Why would that be? Well, in psychology, we studied this idea there's a mind-body connection, that her psychology actually would drive her physical development. That lack of a father would actually drive her then to physical development that would then push her into a relationship with a male earlier in puberty, and so puberty would happen earlier. Now, again, if you're a late bloomer out there, there's also genetics and nutrition and body fat and all these other things that have to do when someone's going to start puberty, but this is just what one of the studies kind of speculates, that it may be because of the absenteeism of her dad. Now, that's correlational research. We can't say that's a causal factor, but it's pretty strong correlational research and something to think about. So anyway, so there's this relationship, there's this fascination with opposite sex parent. Now, Freud, remember, called that the Oedipal complex, where she wants to have sex with her father. She's sexually aroused by her father, and vice versa, a little boy to his mother. Remember, this is where Erikson kind of diverts. It's not a sexual thing, it's a psychosocial thing. There's social relational thing. And so that's our stage from 3 to 6, which was initiative versus guilt.